is for goods to move more efficiently, for services, as well as people. So I think that for us, it's a very important lever for achieving multiple objectives.
Well, what got us here is increasing realization that everywhere neighbors trade with neighbors. This is normal. What has been an anomaly for this continent is that since the 15th century, our trade has been directed primarily outside the continent, and that has to do with the way that Africa was inserted into the global economy. So this is what we're trying to reverse. So everything, our infrastructure has been built to support taking commodities from the interior to the ports and out to the north. So everything concerning trade has been organized around that external trade.
The CFTA negotiations have been complex, needing to take into consideration the individual interests of member states. Beyond the signing of the CFTA, individual countries will need to ratify the agreement.
There is supposed to be a process of ratification before the agreement can come into force. And for ratification, we need 22 member states to deposit their instruments of ratification, meaning that they have gone through their internal, local, national processes for accepting the documents. And then once we have 22 instruments of ratification, then that is when it now comes into force. The agreement that we are creating is not a mere declarative statement or a mere policy statement. It is actually a legal agreement that creates rights, obligations. So we think that at the end of the day, this is an agreement that will have some teeth. But I think beyond all that, there is a political commitment to see this done.
Intra-African trade is one of the lowest of any region globally. The impact of the CFTA will mean Africa's industrial exports are able to diversify, encouraging a move away from extractive commodities such as oil and minerals. Economic integration for the continent will further provide harmony of customs, borders, and the movement of goods.
What this initiative is all about is to say to ourselves, okay, let's create a legal framework, let's establish a treaty so that there is certainty, because in trade, your business person wants to know that those goods that are going across are not going to be seized or discriminated against in some way, that it will be a level playing field. And also our tariffs are relatively high. Over 6% is the average across the continent. To say we want to bring this down to zero, which is what they have agreed for 90% of products, and also to deal with non-tariff barriers like your roadblocks, your anti-trade behavior along the border, harassment at the border.
The flagship project of Agenda 2063 promises to be the world's largest free trade area. But what are the practical implications of having the CFTA implemented? And how exactly would an agreement of this magnitude revolutionize business and movement across Africa?
My mother was a small-scale trader after retiring from her teaching profession. So from very practical terms, having seen people like my mother, small traders, this will facilitate their movement, because alongside the signing of the CFTA, they also 27 member states signed on to the free movement protocol, movement of persons. So cutting the red tape, knowing predictable tax regimes, common external tariff barriers. This gives them assurance, it gives them predictability, and it also gives them a sense that they have protections that are continental.
The most interesting thing to know about this kind of legal agreement is that in certain ways, it protects the little man the most. At the end of the day, for the small man, for the entrepreneur in Nigeria or some other country, the fact that there is a legal agreement that gives him rights as well as obligations actually makes it easier for that little or that young entrepreneur, that small SME company to take the right decisions, because you know that you're not going in on your own. You are going in with the entire legal framework of the African Union.
We have signaled to the world that we want to come together, and we do not want the Africans and the rest of the world to say the leaders made a grand...
Good morning. I hope you had a peaceful night, and again, thank you for keeping time. Today we have quite a long day because we have the excursion coming. So I think we need to start. We are already behind schedule. So those who are out, please come in so that we can start. I request that we take a minute. In our local national parliament, we say prayers, but Pap Clemens has advised that it is a minute of meditation, so you pray to whoever you are praying to. So let's take a minute of meditation, then we can start. Thank you. Now, very fast, quick announcements before we start. Our presenters, I believe, are all here. Now, remember the nominations. We are still receiving nominations for our elections scheduled for tomorrow. The deadline for receiving nomination forms today at 1 p.m. So wherever we shall be, we'll be ready to receive the nomination forms. Remember, we have slots, the positions that are up for election. We have, of course, the president and all the regional representatives and the regional parliament representatives in the council. So we have the president, we have the position for Southern Africa representative, Western Africa, Eastern, Central, North, and the regional parliaments. So please fill in your forms and give them at the registration desk, the secretariat. We are seated there, so please don't forget. Secondly, we are going to have the one continuous session up to around 11:15. Then soon thereafter, we'll break for tea and then proceed for our excursion at the Constitutional Hill. We anticipate to be at the Constitutional Hill at around midday or 12:30. Upon reaching there, we'll be taken round, then have lunch, and in the process of having lunch, the judge will be making his speech or his talk. So prepare for that. We hope that we will be done at the Constitutional Hill by 3 p.m. So that is the program for the day. 3 p.m. we'll then come back. And for those who want to sample South Africa, at least we'll have from 4 p.m. to sample South Africa, the beautiful malls, and all the other places. Make sure you leave some rands here for the economy, and take some souvenirs to your people back home. So that's the program for the day. And with those very many remarks, allow me to invite Clement, who is the moderator of this session. We are starting with the presentation from ADA. They were very gracious yesterday and allowed the program to run because we are beyond schedule, and so we had to push their session to this morning. So we'll be starting the presentation from ADA, and then the other presentation will follow. So, Brother Clement, the floor is yours to introduce the presenters, and we proceed. In Swahili, you say karibu.
Dear colleagues, good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Bonjour. Comment ça va?
How are you? Are you well?
I think we are ready to start with our first session of the day, which will focus on the issue of disability and the role of legal counsel. And for this session, we are going to be led by the Africa Disability Alliance. I'm aware that the executive director of ADA is running late, Mr. Dube, but he will be joining us before even the end of the session. But we have a very able team of resource persons that we are going to rely on. And I would like to call for Mr. Lifoko Kesamang to join us on the podium with Dr. Thomas Ongolo and Madame Ruiz Santinda. Yes. So, as I announced, the session is going to focus on the extent to which the issue of disability is integrated or mainstreamed in lawmaking processes, how it echoes in our laws, because many times in our countries, we end up having laws which do not echo with the aspirations of our people, particularly the most vulnerable of our society. And as you may know, some of the most vulnerable of our society are persons with disability. The session will help to discuss the issue of disability from different perspectives, from a developmental perspective, from a social perspective, from a human rights perspective as well, and to interrogate how legal counsel to Parliament can deliberately take a step to ensuring that the laws that are made in our parliaments take into account the issue of disability. We are aware that in many of our countries, we have laws on disability, disability legislations, but equally, when enacting other laws, it is possible to take into account specific needs and aspirations of persons with disability. For us to start, I will first give the opportunity to Mr. Lifoko Kesamang, who is the Senior Welfare Officer at the African Union Commission. And he will take us through the AU, the African Union legal and institutional framework in relation to the rights of persons with disability. Then his talk will be followed by the presentation from Dr. Ongolo, who is an expert on issues to do with disability and is working also at the African Union Commission. And lastly, Mrs. Risa Ntinda, who is the Chief Legal Advisor to the Law Reform Commission in Namibia, who will also conclude the presentations. And if when Mr. Dube joins us, he will make concluding remarks to just again echo some of the key points that would have been raised by our three panel members. Without any further delay, I invite Mr. Kesamang to take the floor.
Thank you so much, my brother, and ladies and gentlemen, dignitaries here, let me greet you this morning. Fortunately, part of my remarks, I made them yesterday, so I'm going to make it very short, and realizing that, of course, we want to go to Constitutional Hill and see what is this Constitutional Hill, the Constitution on the Hill. We want to go and see it. And now, let me just say that the reason for this is to acknowledge that legal counsel to Parliament are very critical to us. I will speak now from the African Union Commission side and the department I'm representing. Very, very critical and very, very important. That's why yesterday I expressed my delight and my happiness for having been part of this since yesterday. And I want just to take a minute just to share with you the burden that I have. For your own information, normally, except maybe with these protocols, because they are to the African Charter, to the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, and they are the ones who work on the first drafts. But normally, what happens is that we get a decision from ministers. That is the mandate that we have and the privilege that we have amongst the organs, if I'm not mistaken, amongst the organs of the African Union, that we are mandated to convene ministerial meetings. And they make a decision or recommendations. These recommendations are taken to the summit where the Executive Council, which is made of foreign affairs ministers, they will make a decision, which is a standing decision because it will be made during the statutory meeting. And request the Commission, depending which ministerial recommendation it would be, it will request the Commission to come up with a legal instrument or a policy instrument. And because of that request, we will start developing it. I want you to appreciate the process and the challenges that we have, because yesterday we shared with us your challenges and your experiences. And thereafter, of course, we will start developing it using the resources that are your taxes and coming from your taxes and other maybe well-wishers. We call them developing partners. I don't know where that term comes from. Of course, we were trying to run away from donors. So we call them development partners. As to whether really they are developing partners, that is debatable. It's not part of my discussion here. So then we present, we submit it. We would submit the document that we feel it is well done and all that to a validation. After the validation, that's when we will take it to the ministerial meeting where they are going to look at it. If they adopt it, they will endorse it, and then it goes to, if it is a legal instrument, then it goes to another ministerial meeting of Justice and Legal Affairs, where they will have to work on it. Of course, for them, they are lawyers. They look at not the technical content, but they look at the legal content. I remember with this protocol in 2017, I had to defend it for 1.5 days, and I was glad I came out free. The judge declared me not guilty, meaning that they ended up adopting it after grilling me for. So I learned quite a lot as to how you look at documents as compared to how I look at them. The simplest things that I thought they were simple and straightforward, legally they had some issues and all that, and I had to. So after it has now passed through that second ministerial meeting, that's when now it goes to the summit, where the Executive Council again, of course, looks at it, and if it's a legal instrument, that it goes to the heads of state meeting where they are going to adopt it. Thereafter, now it has to go for ratification. Currently, our ratification is about 15 member states that have to ratify it, sign and ratify, or they say assent or whatever. So now, that's where the challenge comes in, because immediately, the member states, including yourselves, the cabinet, your cabinet, your parliament, ministers and everyone, they would say, can you please come and tell us why we should sign and ratify this instrument? Remember, first, it was them who requested it. Second, they set on it 2 different ministers, and the heads of state adopted it and even we come up with a binding decision. And from there, the very same ministers who said, can you come to us and tell us, when they meet every 2 years, they request me every 2 years to give them a report as to how many countries have signed, how many countries have ratified, and the very same ministers, the very same countries, they have neither signed or ratified. But they would ask me to say how many countries have signed and how many have ratified. When I tell them that, no, I was in your country, this is your protocol. So these are the challenges as you maybe face challenges as you advise parliaments or represent parliaments. So I face the similar challenges, because I have now to come to South Africa, go to Benin, go to Burkina Faso, Egypt, and go and tell them why they have to sign and ratify their own product, which they have taken a decision, including at the level of heads of state. So that is why I'm looking at you as friends and as partners who can be able to help doing this. Now, yesterday, the chief Richard Mbura made a statement which is which sounded very to me eye-opening. He said the laws are passed through Parliament. They just pass through Parliament, and Parliament is not maybe working on the laws and all that. And this is the truth of it is that whenever the laws are passed, you may find in most cases in some of the countries that at least I've worked with, that these laws are not inclusive. They exclude certain members of the society. And looking at you, I'm looking at partners that we can work together to ensure that no law should pass unless it has included everyone. Because it is such a difficult thing now to take the law back and review it. And I thought that the laws are simple to review, but they take a long process. Let alone even policies. Policies are not just reviewed overnight. But if we make sure that inclusion starts from the beginning, not as an add-on thing along the way, we will not be having laws now, as we heard from litigation, having been challenged and all that, and the majority of the people being excluded. And you would also find out that as long as the laws are made and they are affecting the society, and they are not discussed at a level where they include everyone, that's where exclusion comes in. I remember just as I was making this short as an introduction, I remember when they were debating the AU Agenda 2063, when I asked my colleagues, hey, you guys, how are you doing your consultations? They said, no, we go to the capitals. And I told them that in my country, there is a community called the Sun. For you call them the Bushmen. You will never find them in the capital city. So if you go and consult, you are going to consult the elite. Those who have been maybe chosen by the government, or they are already in the capital city, the decision makers, but they are not representing everyone, and they are not even representing that community. So we are still going to have an Africa that is exclusive, that excludes the rest of the people. And I know that the Sun will find them in South Africa, in Namibia, and in Botswana, and maybe some parts of Zimbabwe. If not, yeah. Having said this, I just wanted to give this, that the reason why this is important for us to be here is because we overlook at laws and all that, but it's very, very important for us to build this relationship, especially at the AU the Commission level. Having said this, let me just let you know that the Disability Protocol was adopted by heads of state in 2018. January 2018, and thus far only 6 countries have signed and no ratification, and we need 15. And why did we have a disability protocol? It's because we are moving forward as Africa under the guidance of our AU Agenda 2063, and we cannot pretend that everyone is in this bandwagon. When yesterday, is it Tato from Lexis was presenting here, and he was talking about the fourth revolution, I was seated there and asking myself, are we even sure that the very same people that I'm representing here, they even know of the first revolution? I don't know what it is. Whatever the fourth revolution is, we are talking about the fourth revolution, but there are the majority of over 100 million in Africa who don't even know maybe, or have never even experienced the first and the second revolution, whatever those are. So these are some of the challenges that we need to look at. We may talk about this, that Parliament can connect, we can discuss everywhere, but the question that the protocol is trying to address is that there are millions of people in Africa who are left behind. And I like the question that my colleague Thomas asked yesterday when the Member of Parliament was presenting here, to say that we see a regress in the representation of persons with disability in the South African Parliament. And you will see it across many parliaments. There are some who have made maybe a step forward, and then they make 3, 4, 5 steps backward. And those are some of the things that we cannot ignore. That is why we come up with this protocol, to address African challenges pertaining to persons with disability. The last that I want also to address you on is the one on older persons. It was adopted by heads of state in January 2016. So far, 14 signatures have been made with 2 ratifications. And the first country to ratify is the Kingdom of Lesotho. And this year, the Republic of Benin also ratified. We need now 13 ratifications for it to come into force. And I'm saying this to you, I'm saying this to me, because I am growing old. Are we together? And I need this protocol. People were always asking me, why are you pushing this protocol on aging? You look young, but don't be deceived by the features that you see in me. I'm about to retire. So I always say, it is not about what is happening now. It's about your future, that you are going to age. I mean, you are going to retire one day. You are aging. Everyone is aging anyway. From conception to close to the grave, you are aging. So everyone is aging, and we need to ensure that the rights of older persons in Africa, the rights of persons with disability in Africa are protected. When you age, you tend to have some impairments as you grow old. It's a given, isn't it? And persons with disability also age. And that is why I see a synergy between these two protocols, that they work together, and we have to push them as one and make sure that by 2020 all of them both of them are ratified. And one protocol is coming. I mentioned it yesterday. The one on is a draft protocol on the African Charter on Human People's Rights, on the rights of citizens to social protection and social security. That is one where I was saying that I'm going to invite a member, a representative from the Council, as well as a representative from Pan-African Parliament to be with us in Abidjan as we finalize it. And lastly, my brother and the acting clerk, let me also mention that I know very well that in August I missed a meeting here because I was engaged somewhere where you adopted the disability model law, and we have to pass this through the systems if it functions the way it is, meaning that it has to go to the ministers' meeting in 2021, and for it to go to the ministers' meeting, as I'm standing here, I'm just waiting in abated breath to get it through our Office of the Legal Counsel, so that I can plan for 2020 for it to be validated. And it's one of the most important documents. It has to be validated. It has now to go to the for the ministerial meeting in 2021, and thereafter go to the Ministers of Justice and Legal Affairs, because it doesn't have to be ratified immediately. Member states will use it when it has been cleared by the summit. It's one of the developments that we are looking at, and I'm encouraging you that in your parliaments, with your parliamentary law reform and any settings, if you want me, a resource, of course, available to come and address you on any of these protocols that I'm talking about, I'm available, and it is my duty. I'm paid by your taxes to do this work, and if I'm not doing it, I'll be cheating you by taking your taxes and sitting well and enjoying my life. So this is a challenge to each one of you, whether you are in Somalia, you are in Burundi, or you are in Cote d'Ivoire, or you are in Senegal, you are in Lesotho or Eswatini, Mozambique, anywhere. I'm available. It is my duty to come and do my little best to make sure that these protocols are understood by the Parliament before they even have to debate them by your cabinet, by your reform committees, by anyone, and working with you. Any other resource or opportunities that I find, I'm willing to ensure that we move our Africa together forward. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
Thank you. One second. Yes. Thank you very much. As well, I'd also like to thank the Colloquium for extending the invitation so that I can also add my voice to this important topic. I'm going to respond to 4 areas which my good and able friend, Lefoko Kusamang, has highlighted in his presentation. And he's touched quite a whole broad spectrum of topics in terms of how do we ensure that the rights of persons with disability in Africa are promoted and protected. First, I think he did mention that within the AU system, there are a couple of stages in which we have seen excellent expertise in terms of advice from the different. Okay, sorry. I'll address that. That's what we call reasonable accommodation. And yesterday when our good friend from Lexus was talking, and I was very delighted because it's the power of technology that has made me juggle and navigate through different platforms. And that's what I'm using my laptop here with a lot of ease and confidence. I think he mentioned that the different protocols, when they originate through resolutions, and the Banjul Commission sets up the different working groups. I think one common phenomenon which has been a practice, and a good practice, and that is the good advice from the legal counsel. And we have seen that with the disability protocol, we saw it with the older person protocol, where quite a whole good spectrum of expertise, both from the councils within the Banjul Commission, but also from the African Union International Legal Council. And that did raise quite a different perspective, especially on different topics. I remember the whole issue about access to justice for persons with disability, Article 13. And moving on to certain areas within the protocol. But then the other area where we also saw good support from different legal counsel and legal advice was during the validations. And such document, when adopted by the Banjul Commission and taken through the process that my friend Lefoko mentioned within the African Union Commission, there's always the vulnerability of the document, especially where you start getting different voices that would want to push back or claw back some of the gains in terms of rights. And I think that balance did help. And so that the current protocol, we could say, is very much in sync in terms of normative rights, in terms of set standards we see in the United Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability, but also affirming some Africa contextual experiences that we have. You look at the document, we see certain aspects like cultural rights, or aspects that deals with culture, killings of persons with albinism. I think all these have been captured in this particular new protocol. But of course, the one on the very last, which you did also mention, was when it comes to adoption at the ministerial meeting as the STCs, the voice of the Office of the Legal Counsel in Addis Ababa also did play quite a meaningful role. But secondly, in my response to Lefoko's presentation, I would like to confirm that in this room, we are from different backgrounds and with different expertise. But one thing that makes us all united is that we come from our different African cultural experiences. And with our African different cultural experiences as well as religious experiences, all these tend to affect how we craft or respond to issues about disability rights. I'm mentioning this because there are different models that we know that exist when we're talking about disability. Quite a good number of you, because you are from the church or from the mosque, doing good for the welfare of persons with disability is an investment up in heaven. Yeah, that's what the Holy Book says. And that affects how laws are crafted. We take a more theological approach in terms of our relation and interpretation. Or we are from both a medical background or charity model, and you see those prints in our legislations where disability rights is looked within the lens of the medical. You are to be fixed. You have impairment. So laws are crafted to correct the difficulties which you are encountering in relating with the society. And that's why we're calling it the charity, the medical model. But at the same time, we are saying, no, the problem is not my inability to see. The problem is not my difficulty to move through an environment. The problem is not my difficulty to remember or to hear. That's not where the problem is. The social dimension of disability says that it's an interaction. My impairment, my inability not to see, coupled with the barriers around me. I get the program on a piece of paper. It's that barrier that I have a program, I have a whole document on a file on my table. That is what creates the barrier and the disability not to participate. And my colleague will expound that much more capably. So it's that barrier. So if you drop that barrier, if I get my documents on a PDF or a Word document via email, then you are dropping the barrier. So we'll, as my colleagues will also expound on that, there's a human rights approach, which then affirms that it is an issue of rights. I also want to bring up certain principles which should inform our different pieces of legislation. And some of it, I know you'll look at the main document, the main protocol on the rights of persons with disability. I think there's one important principle which cuts across to enhance participation, to enhance realization of those rights, and that is accessibility and reasonable accommodation. And here I'm referring to reasonable accommodation as all the necessary means or appropriate modifications or adjustments which are done where needed, so that a person or person with disability can be able to enjoy or participate equally like anybody else. You saw the adjustment which was made in this particular rostrum has made participation for all my comrades around here with a lot of ease. It's because of reasonable accommodation. We have, as a person with disability, all the support system, and you see it. And I would like to give a thumbs up and congratulate a few parliaments which have made that environment. I know the parliament of Uganda, the parliament in South Africa, Kenya, which also acknowledges that it's not just a member of parliament who can be on the floor, but also a sign language interpreter, for the main reason for creating that enabling environment, and that is reasonable accommodation. In concluding, my last and concluding point is also adding this passionate plea that in our different parliaments, understanding the issue about disability can only be realized, not because we have members with disability in those respective parliaments, but there are a community on disability. In other words, there are people who have children with disability, who have brothers and sisters with disability, or relatives, or adopted children with disability. It's this community that have been able to push different legislations across the continent. And I would like to really salute all those. This couple of months I was with 2 members of parliament in the course of the year, and one being Senator Isaac Mora from Kenya. And there's one interesting thing that he mentioned, that they have an association of parliamentarians on disability. Remember, I'm very careful in terms of what? Members of parliament on disability. And the numbers were very much reflective, because the number did not reflect the members of parliament with disability, both from the Senate and the National Assembly, but also other members of parliament who, in one way or another, either having children or siblings, or even had parents who had disability. And it's through that collective advocacy they have been able to create that interaction. My colleagues, you sit in a very strategic point in our different parliament as advisors, legal advisors, that can change our different instruments. I would like to add onto the voice and appeal by Lefoko that the protocol on the rights of persons with disability currently awaits processing, especially ratification in our different parliaments, and we know the different systems. So if this instrument comes into the parliament for adoption, I hope this team and delegations in this particular colloquium will be able to support this instrument. Thank you.
Now I call upon Madame Ruiza to address
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Rusa Ntinda. I'm a Chief Legal Officer at the Law Reform and Development Commission in Namibia. So basically, I'm the lawyer to the group, and I am going to appeal to you as a lawyer, not necessarily as from a social background. So everybody have talked about the three protocols that they want us to appeal, that to ratify, that they are appealing to us. But I wanted to look at basically what we are trying to say is that we are not saying Africa until now has not done anything. We are not saying that. We are actually very grateful for all the steps that Africa has taken. It shows the political will and the need to protect some of its very vulnerable groups. So let's look at what has Africa done so far with regard to disability. Now, then the Charter on People and Human Rights in Article 18.4 provides for states to adopt measures for the needs of persons with disability, but it clusters it together with the elderly persons. So they were given really little provision as a subsection within a section. Then we go on to the African Charter on the Rights of the Child. Article 13 provides that states should adopt measures for children with disability, but again, it's just a section within a charter. Fine, measures should be adopted, but it does not specifically specify to which end. Then we go on to the African Protocol, the Youth Protocol, Article 24. Provide again that states should adopt measures to ensure the rights of youth with disability. Then again, we again fail to realize that even if there are disabilities within the youth, there are different types of disabilities. And this is the same for the protocol on the rights of a woman, the African Maputo Protocol. Again, Article 23. Again, it's almost the one for youth, the one for children, the one for women almost reads exactly the same. The only difference for children is that they put the best interest of the child. They focus mainly on the child, but somehow for the youth and women, they just replace the word youth and put women. And then we adopted the African Decade on Disability, 2009 to 2019, which is ending this year, and it will be replaced with the Disability Strategic Framework, which was adopted in April this year. And then there's a resolution 263 on prevention of discrimination on persons with of attacks and discrimination on persons with albinism, and the regional action plan on persons with albinism. So all these instruments shows that Africa is trying to provide for its own. However, now the question comes in, which I myself have also been asked by my own Minister of Justice, is if we have signed the CRPD, why do we still need the African Protocol? Isn't the African Protocol watering down what we have already signed there? My answer to that will be that, yes, at the global level, we have provided for our persons with disability at the global level, but at the African regional level, we don't have anything that specifically targets this group of persons, on the basis basically that Africa is unique in its own nature. We are the kind of people on the globe who believe in extended families. We don't have nucleus families. We believe the child is raised by the village, isn't that so? By the community, and not always just by the parent. And that's why we needed an African-specific protocol. Now here's why this protocol needs to be ratified. What does the protocol provide for that is not in the CRPD? First of all, the protocol provides for ritual killings. The killings are mostly in SADC. The highest number is in SADC, which now begs the question, what is SADC doing? Because that reflects very bad on the regional area. And then it provides for situations of risk. How many areas in Africa do we have civil unrest? It also provides for the word stigmatization. That does not exist within the CRPD. The convention, the protocol further goes on to look at the right to education. The right to education, basically, it looks at the fact that we must adopt a sectoral approach to education. No one way fits one person, fits all. So no formal understanding of education, but rather get all the players to get involved. The same article goes on to say that education within the African sector must reflect, preserve, and strengthen African values, which that does not exist in the CRPD. The protocol further goes on to say that it introduces areas in health, community health-based care, in-house health care, residential health care, and community support to ensure that persons within the community setting are provided for, because we believe it is not a home issue, it's a community issue. We are raised by the village, not by the parents alone. The protocol goes on to provide for self-determination, not self-determination, but self-representation in everyday life. It provides for the girl child, not just women, but specifically for the girl child. It further provides for youth, specifically with disability. The CRPD does not provide for that. It also provides for elderly persons. Majority of us, or all of us, are heading that way. So it shouldn't be an issue of, it's not currently my problem. You know, a boat, the society we live in, it's a boat in the sea, at high sea. The moment one side of that boat starts to capsize, we are all going down, isn't it? So it shouldn't be the issue, it's not currently my issue. I can walk fine, I can talk fine, you know, but you are reaching 60, you are going all the way there, you suffer a stroke, perhaps diabetes, high blood pressure. There's so many things that can happen, but now, because it's not our problem, we don't provide for it. And then when you are no longer employed, when you are no longer able to defend yourself, then you go, oh yeah, that's what they were talking that time. Now when you need it, you did not use that time you had to make a change. Now you want someone else to make a change, but you had a chance to make this change and you didn't make that change. I had a driver from MBC, a cameraman actually from the Namibian Broadcasting Corporation, who used to say a lot about disability. They are taking over. It's always them. As I'm talking now, this guy is retrenched because he had a car accident and the windshield broke and the glasses went into his eyes and now he's blind. Now he wants everybody to do something, but when it was his time, he was shunning everybody else. So don't think of, it's not currently my issue. The protocol also provides for duties. Persons with disability are not only right bearers, but they also have a duty towards the community and their state. So that's why this protocol is very important that Africa ratifies it, African country ratifies it, because it embodies areas that do not necessarily are not necessarily provided for in the CRPD, but are part of our culture as an African nation. So lastly, I wanted to look at it from my background in work. I'm a former magistrate, a former practicing lawyer, private counsel, and currently law reform is my area. So how do I join them to see how to advise or to assist Parliament? Whenever we are looking at laws within our Parliament or we are advising our people within Parliament, is that whenever we are doing any law, first of all, each country must understand that when you are doing any law, irrespective of which area, make sure you look at how does that law affect the minority groups, not just persons with disability, but what about the elderly, women, children, the girl child, and marginalized communities or vulnerable communities. Always look at that. Don't just look at the bigger picture, but always unpack it. It's an onion. Try to get to the layers that are not visibly as you see it. Secondly, get expertise. We understand you are all lawyers, but we have realized not all lawyers understand the vulnerability of certain groups. We have a case in Namibia. Namibia has never declared on disability, ever. We don't even have a disability as a ground for non-discrimination. But we had a case of FESA versus the MVA. So it's mostly FESA versus the Minister of Finance, but it was actually MVA. But MVA, the Motor Vehicle Accident Fund, falls under finance in our country. The court failed to actually deal with the aspect. It only looked at procedures of civil claims, but fails to understand that this guy became a quadriplegic. He will need more care, more assistance, a proper functioning wheelchair, irrespective of what the CAPS MVA has put there, irrespective of how he has claimed. If he was a quadriplegic and couldn't do anything, do you really expect him to have filed those papers on time? So the court failed to declare itself on it. But then what we realized was the counsels themselves who presented before the court didn't understand anything about disability. So it doesn't hurt to get expertise from someone who understands disability and the law. They think of consult persons with disability, nothing for us without us. However, I will also want to have a disclaimer in that nowhere in that sentence does it say nothing for us without only us. It says without us, meaning we need to work together, persons without disability and persons with disability, to go forward. Because one day, somehow, we will all meet. And then public consultations are very important in everything, in every law that you are going to advise Parliament on. Get public consultations. When you are going to do any law, ask yourself, what do we currently have? Where do we want to go? That's only when you will understand what you need to change. Use statistics. Do you have statistics? Currently, Namibia is a small population. We have about 115,000 persons with disability. 70% of that is eligible to vote. So now the question is, does the Electoral Commission has measures in place to ensure that these persons are eligible to vote? Those are voters that you are losing because you have not thought of how to provide for them. So these are things that I think we should look at, and I would just like to end here. Thank you.
Yeah. So now we are going to hear the speech or the presentation by Mr. Dube.
Oh, thank you very much indeed. I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to interact on this topic. You know, and the good news is I'm speaking last. So, and whenever you speak last, then you have an opportunity to reflect on what has been said before. I don't know whether we have got anything on the screen, but I will look at my screen. Oh yeah, it looks like something is coming up on the screen. Now, the role of legal counsel to parliaments. One of the things that I thought about when I saw this topic was actually every time you have to start looking at the legal counsel around you, and you look at what have they done, what are they doing. So when I looked around me, I saw the legal counsel that worked with Mr. Kesamang on the protocol. Now, here is the AU legal department comprised of the best of lawyers, and the way that they took the Africa Disability Protocol and ran with it and defended it. There were times even us as seasoned activists, we would sit there and they will say, don't say anything. We will defend this protocol. Now, when you come to that level of articulation and awareness, that's when you say, wow, this is very good. And they can do it whether you are there or not. Then I looked at the legal counsel of Pan-Africa Parliament. Although they've been quiet throughout since yesterday, we are very, very proud of the legal counsel of Parliament, because in many instances, when they were promoting the model disability law, I mean, we sat there and we simply looked at this, at the beauty of African professionals that were executing their tasks and making sure that they communicate what the model disability law was. We want to thank you very much, Legal Counsel of Parliament, Mr. Kesamang. We want to thank you too. We still owe you a lot of thanks, and we are still coming. We want to thank you for the role that you played. Now, yesterday, we heard from the president of, the deputy president of Pan-African Parliament. We also ahead from the Chief Legal Advisor, Ms. Zuraya Adikari, and the patron of the Colloquium. We have also in our presence Honorable Joshua Malinga. Now, as it turns out, the people that you see here, they have been around for quite a long time. And Honorable Joshua Malinga is one of them. We have the pleasure of receiving you here, and we look forward to your greetings. And we have honorable members of parliament. Now, that's the other beauty. The members of parliament themselves were debating disability as if they were people with disabilities themselves. So Dr. Thomas Ongolo is now with the AU, but he was with us before. And look at the role of the media and all the other people that were part of the whole process. So this then says to us, if we are a legal counsel to parliaments, what role can we play? And how can we, do we have to be many? Do I just need to be alone? And if I am to be alone, or if I don't have capacity, that is, which normally is the case, you don't have capacity within your departments, and yet you have so much to do. So the treaty drafting process, this was already communicated by both Dr. Thomas Ongolo and Mr. Kesamang. The public consultations that went into all this, the advocacy work. So it's not like holding back and saying my role is legal counsel, so therefore I'm not part of it. We saw our legal counsel advocating for the acceptance of the law. And we saw them helping, assisting to the debates. We saw them actively engaging in the debates that were going on. So what we need to do then is to try and not to redefine your role as legal counsel, but rather to say there is a lot more that you can do beyond simply defending cases that are brought by parliament or to parliament, and that as you almost become part of the whole campaign that we are undertaking now. I will skip some of the slides because a lot has been said already. I will go to the ratification of the protocol. I hope that's what you, yeah, that's right. So now we have heard both from Dr. Thomas Ongolo and from Mr. Kesamang and from my sister Rasi that we need to now work on the ratification of the protocol. So again, within your role as legal counsel to parliaments, your role now shifts towards ratification. I had a meal yesterday with legal counsel from Kenya, and I was saying our role now turns to persuading parliament, but also everybody else who may not understand, why do we have to ratify? You become the enlightened advocate who is able to communicate the message behind these protocols and demonstrating the utility of it, just like my sister has just done here. Why do we need the protocol? It's a question that we get asked everywhere. Educating governments that send delegates to your parliaments and using all the innovative ways of making sure that everybody understands that it is important to ratify. So, but however, look at your role as well as a legislature. The Pan-African Parliament works with other parliaments. And we immediately, now that even the Pan-African Parliament has now adopted the model disability law, our next task immediately, we will not wait, our next task is to prepare the parliament so that it can start implementing whatever we can implement for now. And one of them is to ensure that this message is carried out to the national and regional parliaments in Africa. We need now to introduce the judiciary to this debate. Where are the judges? And we need to make sure that they too are made aware of this law and how they will implement it. We need to continue working with civil society organizations and individuals so that they can become aware of this law and that they can be able to use it. We now need strong legal resource centers. Legal resource centers that will make sure that if I am in the deep rural area of Kisimu in Kenya, I am able to know what this law says and how I can use it. Because remember, laws are about individuals coming together as groups or as individuals and protecting their rights. And we cannot do that if we don't know the laws that are applicable. So we really need to start thinking how to make sure that African citizens are able to utilize the law that is coming up. Now, one of the constituencies that we need to bring on board are government departments. I can see a lot of legal action being taken against governments. And the reason being that they are the duty bearers. They are the duty bearers, and we as rights holders have been complaining about many things for many years, for many decades. So this law is likely to bring in a lot of legal action that is of public interest. And what we are trying to avoid is having to take the very same parliaments that have adopted this law, like the Pan-Africa Parliament, and then we end up taking you to court for non-compliance of the law that you passed. So we find that a lot with our own parliaments here in Africa. I did a study on the legislative sector in South Africa, and I went to all the 9 legislatures in the country, and indeed there was a lot of violation of laws. And you almost say that, well, this is the law that you formulated, but now, look, I have to take you on it. So the violation of laws that we are passing is a matter that is of interest to all of us. And particularly you as Council of Parliaments, you need to be aware of the laws because those laws apply to you as well as institutions. So it's important that we prepare for that. Of course, the governments will now domesticate the whole legal fraternity, basically, from academia to the judiciary, a systematic database of case laws and studies. I mean, we had a presentation yesterday from a software company that can help us with that. All these are measures that we now need to put in place. Manuals, reference materials on the law, so that we popularize and we educate everybody around us. So let me conclude by saying then that, look, these laws are useful for us. They help Africa towards the goal of harmonization. And to quote Mr. Kesamang, that these efforts have saved our continent almost centuries that we would have taken in order for us to bring out these norms and standards. If you look at it carefully, many countries still don't have disability acts, and yet they got their independence decades ago. So if you put that logic on it, you can then see that these laws and the work that we have done so far, this is far ahead of its time. So we have a responsibility to make sure that we make it work. As a way forward then, number one, let's now agree, we all agree, that as we are here in the colloquium as legal counsel, in your practices, but also in your workplaces as in Parliament, that we are now ambassadors of this law. We are ambassadors of the Africa Disability Protocol. We are ambassadors of the Model Disability Law. Number two, let's agree on joint programs that we can work together on and that promote the protocol and the Model Disability Law. Such a program could be multifaceted. It could include capacity building. It could include implementation of certain articles that we choose from time to time. And I'm looking here at Article 3 and 4 of the protocol. Those also affect legislatures. If I look at the Article 15 on accessibility, that affects legislatures. It means your legislatures must also be accessible. Of course, we have a challenge in the sense that Pan-Africa Parliament and the African Commission for Human and People's Rights in Banjul in Gambia, they are occupying premises that are not yet theirs. And they are yet to move to their own precincts. Although we are able to assist with accessibility, but we can't do it on properties that we don't own. So the right to work, that will be brought to you, the right to participate in political and public life, and we are doing well as Africa on that. We have people with disabilities that will now come here as parliamentarians, and they will need an environment that is accessible, or else they then have to enforce the law. And then Article 33 on cooperation. This is where we as Africans are then saying, let's cooperate to promote and enhance the values that we stand for. And then let's now mainstream disability in all the programs of the African Colloquium on legal counsel. So it's a new dynamic organization, and we have an opportunity now, when you are still new, to ensure that we work together to mainstream disability effectively. Let us establish specific divisions or units or mainstream divisions that are able to move with this work. And of course, let's sign so that we all agree in memoranda that this is the way that we are going. So I want to thank the Pan-Africa Parliament quite a lot, and also the AU, for the work that you have done with us over the past 3 years when we were working on the protocol and on the Model Disability Law. And the next phase of this work is implementation ecosystems. And we have to develop ecosystems of a varied nature that will now enable us to implement the laws that we adopted. Thank you.
Yeah, colleagues, could we again give a round of applause to all the presenters? Now we are going to have an interaction session, and I have a few comments to make before allowing participants to also intervene.
Mr. Malinga just wanted to sing some greetings, just 1 or 2 words. Mr. Malinga, at the end.
Yeah, thank you so much. I was being advised that Honorable Malinga would make some greeting remarks at the end of the interactive session. For now, I would like to just highlight a few issues which I believe are of a particular interest to us as a legal counsel to Parliament. First of all, the fact that the issue of disability is an issue that requires a specific attention and a deliberate action from a legal counsel. The way is paved already because at the international level and regional level, we have quite a number of instruments, particularly treaties at the UN level and at the African Union level, particularly the African Charter on Human and People's Rights. But we also have 2 protocols, particularly the protocol on the rights of persons with disability and the